Hey everybody, it's Brian Lambert here on the AI Lead Show. Welcome back. Coming to you live every Friday at noon Eastern. And today, a great topic, something that I've been talking to a lot of people about lately, and that's what are all the opportunities that we have in the AI space today? What's happening with jobs? Where are jobs going? What's going to be in the future of the job world? What do we need to learn? How do we need to learn it? And where are we heading? So we're going to talk about that today on the show. When we talk about moving things forward in a very competitive, rapidly evolving world that we work in, AI can help us with that. But how? Digital transformation has been going on for years, but how is that evolving and how are we being equipped as workers in the AI age? There's a lot of hidden opportunity. There are people looking for opportunities, and there's a lot of perhaps negative press in the world of work around AI displacing jobs. So we're going to explore that today and talk about how careers are evolving. So a bit of news, AI-powered jobs. They're interesting. Have you thought about the different jobs that are out there? And more importantly, have you explored lately on LinkedIn or perhaps in other job boards, what type of roles are emerging? When you look at the news and just look at the job postings, there are many different roles that are actually becoming new normal, if you will. AI engineers doing work with large language models and even small language models inside of organizations. There are people doing training to help employees understand how to do prompts and how to get those nuanced answers out of AI, and more importantly, how to understand what's biased and what's not from an AI perspective. Data, a lot of work and a lot of focus on the data space today. Well, and you know that's always been a focus, but when you take focus and you look at funding as well, a lot more investment on data as a product, data ownership. And then there's been a lot of headlines and a lot of press around the ability to create with AI, whether it's movies, videos, images, documents, websites. Generative AI has really made inroads into areas of traditional knowledge work. An idea that pops into mind is just thinking about all the digital content that's being created on platforms like Netflix and Spotify, and how those data assets that they have, those digital assets that they have, become more and more focused on what people want and what people want to experience and really what they want to be entertained by. So those roles are continuing to be invested in, and it's an interesting space because at the same time, the way that these products are being built and the technologies themselves are coming to market, there's actually a lot of different tools that can be put in the hands of everybody from developers and engineers that are writing code. I don't know if you've heard about this, but the actual ability to do coding with AI. Having AI help you troubleshoot connections, help you troubleshoot APIs, troubleshoot your data, troubleshoot your code, run tests with your code. The ability to do that has really accelerated rapid prototyping. There's actually integrations that are a little bit more organic, if you will, on how humans think, such as Notion with Jira. You have on one hand a very structured aspect of Jira, and a very unstructured aspect of Notion coming together with the help of AI. And then there's a lot of work on what would be considered the AI pipeline, a LangChain, if you've never heard of that, the ability to string together models and string together AI features and technologies. And that's really making inroads inside of organizations as they figure out how to pilot and prototype things out. And the last bit of news that I discovered was looking at the investments that companies like Meta and Facebook and and others are making in the space, NVIDIA, TikTok, Airbnb, their paid internships are becoming an interesting inroad for a lot of folks graduating or even in their junior, senior year of college and university. And it's interesting to think about what they're looking for. They're looking for people that understand the technical aspects of AI, but also understand the human aspect of AI. In other words, when you think about AI and the power of it, it's through natural language. It's through the ability to prompt and write and being specific and being structured in what you say and what you write. That's become important for all technologists, if you will. So it's less about specifics of code and more about how does code help humans. So let's talk about that. Let's bring our panel back in here and introduce Scaler. We've got Integrator. We've got Orchestrator. Hey guys, how are you doing? Thanks for joining us. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and perhaps some commentary on the news today. What jumps out at you? Love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I'm looking forward to this today. We've been talking a lot about roles and how they're gonna change, right? And it just keeps moving so fast. And as I think about it, I was doing some research earlier into manufacturing and retail and how some of these roles are gonna change. And what I'm not finding though is there's very little specifics around it. They just say the organizations are working with educational institutions, or they're upskilling by 2030, or they're building an AI academy, but they don't say specifically what they're doing and what roles are emerging as a result of this. So it's just it's very deep in terms of what I'm finding. So really, really interesting topic today.
So are you seeing it's more of a generic, hey, we're hiring people, but there's not a lot of specifics in what they're looking specifically for when you're doing that research?
Yeah, they're not. They're saying they're giving very generalizations about how organizations should go about it, but they're not highlighting specific roles yet in terms of much of the research that I'm seeing. So.
That's interesting. What about you, Integrator? What are you seeing out there in the job market and the roles that you're experiencing? Have you seen anything?
Yeah, I've seen some things like conversational AI. Recently saw, what was that, AI ethicist. It's interesting to see how many of these roles wind up having some technical dimension to them anyway. Right. And I think that's part of the issue. I think about all of these failed implementations. You say that, I kind of wince, like a failed implementation. It's usually because somebody hasn't integrated it fully. Like, for instance, this thing might work a lot better if we had it integrated into Slack already, so people didn't have to go out of the way to use it. But the evolution of roles going forward, I think, is really going to hinge on that. How good are you at sticking the right pieces together behind the scene? And that's not just a technical role, that's a design role for these people who are doing prompt engineering.
Yeah, and Brian, to pick up on that slide that you had with actual roles and numbers, I think we need more of that. And so once you see something tangible, then you can kind of point to it and say, all right, this isn't theory, this isn't concept. And that was one, we've got a AI boot camp, and you're going to be there doing one of the sessions next week. 180 people, got a lot of input coming into this event. And the one thing that AI came back and said was that the people that are attending this session, they go across professions, across industries, but they're all now looking for something that they can do something with. It basically came back and said, no more theoretical concepts. Be sure not to cover that. Cover what you can do with it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the proof is in the pudding, and devil's in the details. There's a lot of cliches there. And I think for the last 2.5 years, there's been a lot of investment, a lot of buzz around AI. And the thing that's been interesting to watch is what are the buckets of response to that? Obviously, you have vendors that are talking about how they're going to help with AI, but you have a lot of expense and spend on and investments on the platform models themselves. And then infrastructure. So platform models and infrastructure is basically like energy. So we've invested in energy sources that can power a lot of different things, but it's kind of like electric automobiles, if you will, when they first got started. Just because they exist doesn't mean people are going to use them or drive them, even though perhaps they should, right? If that's what you think, right? So that's the interesting part about AI is all of this infrastructure, all of the platform models, the billions and trillions of dollars being spent to get it up and running. And then I saw an article, and I have to validate it. I didn't get a chance to look at it, but hearing that companies like China are investing in mandatory required training for their kids around AI, but more importantly, not how to use it, which is, I think, the American way, if you will. The North American way is how do we use it? They're actually forcing them, if you will, or encouraging them or making it required to learn about how it works, which is an interesting difference between the two approaches. Wherein perhaps in North America, it's what's it going to do for me? How's it going to help me? Oh, it's going to take advantage of us and end up hurting us and steal all our money and do deep fakes and date my girlfriend or whatever, versus the other approaches, which are, well, let's make sure we understand how it works so that we can harness it like the energy source that it is. And I think those are two different interesting paradigms, because the more you start understanding how it works, the more you start realizing that it can't necessarily go off and hurt people. It's the people involved. It's the people wielding the AI that are doing it. It's not the AI of itself. It's like money. If you have tons of money and you're an evil person, you might use the money for evil. But if you have a ton of money and you're a good person, you're going to maybe use it for good. Same thing with AI. It's the wielding of the AI that's important. And
say, Brian, I wonder, if you had kind of a rolling titles, even on our Friday sessions like this, just saying, here's another AI job. For everyone that might be lost job, right? It's really going to be transformed into something that's called something different. So maybe we have this running list of new titles to give those that are concerned about it, because it is, what does it mean to me, not my company, oftentimes, kind of hope that, hey, there's something else.
Yeah. Yeah, and when I first heard about like prompt engineering, I kind of was like, oh, okay, here's a group of people who have really, talk about overhyping their job. I engineer prompts, but then when you start looking at it and realizing that prompts are not just like single questions, I've actually seen like a 5-page prompt, and these are very technical documents. It's like technical writing. So I can understand why that level of specificity, structure, the order of it, all of those things kind of matter in the AI world. And I think, I can put it on there, right? Like we have the ability with technology. I can actually, show a little ticker. There we go, and do it in real time. Right. So we have prompt engineer, AI ethicist. What are some other ones that you've heard of? Conversational AI. Right. And I've seen some that are AI product owner, building AI native.
AI trainers, sales enablement AI strategists. So, and you mentioned earlier, right? So there's kind of the two things. There's what can AI do for me and how do I use it? One approach. But for all these roles, they really do need to know how it works, because they're going to be architectures, right? Architects of AI in terms of how they're going to work with it. So you take your role expertise, mine in, say, developing courses and training, and okay, how am I going to work with AI to not just use it as a tool to help me be more efficient, but to help work with the technology people to write the type of code to make sure that it does what it's supposed to do. So that's a fascinating opportunity.
Yeah,
from that perspective.
And if you think about it, as we move to the next piece, there's this idea of what is our strategy Is AI going to automate or is it going to augment? So automate jobs or augment humans? What actual tools exist? And I know, Integrator, you've done a lot of work around the different AI tools that are out there and the different buckets of AI tools. And to your point, Scalar, the idea of the people side of this, what are they doing and how are they learning? Those are critical aspects of pulling off any strategy, not just an AI infused one. And I think that's the interesting thing is to many people, AI is really just the next evolution in the space of work, right? It's nothing. We've seen all this before. We saw it with cloud. We saw it with the latest mobile. We had this hype around Bitcoin, right? So, is this just another fad? I've had those questions. Have you all?
I don't think so.
What's that?
I don't think this is a fad. This is it.
Why would you say?
I don't have people.
Well, it's once you get used to working with it, and again, I think I'm a perfect example of someone that's, sir, I'm curious, so I like to learn, right? And hey, I use AI to learn about AI, and I don't know why people don't want to take advantage of that, right? So, I was doing some research on, what's a RAG and how does that work? Hey, how does a vector database work? And AI is, painting me pictures on how that all works and how quick is that, right? Used to have to drive to the library and get a book and do that. Now it's right there. And so all roles would, I think, be able to, learn so quickly. And again, some of the research I was doing was more around, again, the type of training that the large organizations were offering for AI. They just weren't really being specific. There was just kind of a blueprint for how to do it.
And I think AI is one of those things like, is it a solution looking for a problem to solve, or is it something else? So I think if you were to frame out any challenge, any problem, and then ask yourself, would unlimited computing power and precision and structure and scientific method, would that help any problem? And the answer to that is, to me, yes. AI is extremely helpful, but you got to point it at a problem. I can also just be infinitely curious with AI. And Anthropic put out a report of how people are using Claude, and it was pretty fascinating. Everything from plumbing to, high-end surgeries, very like brain surgery, literally. There's a lot going on in the medical field too, of understanding it. Because if you think about all those research reports, you have to wade through so much to just net it out. I have a degree, a PhD, and they used to actually teach us that you can skip all that stuff and go straight to the back and read the conclusion. After 10 pages, you can get to the conclusion, but what's going on in those 10 pages actually matters to some degree, depending on what question you're pursuing. It doesn't matter for everything, but what's the question? What's the problem? And I think that's part of this. And people are, to me, in my humble opinion, people are missing out if they haven't tried to apply AI in some sort of challenge or some sort of specific opportunity or problem to solve.
Brian, as you were talking there, Field of Dreams, Kevin Costner. It's a good movie, right? My bet is quite a few people and listeners out there have seen the movie Field of Dreams. So he builds the field and they come. Well, that works for Kevin Costner. It doesn't work for me. I could build stuff all day long. Nobody's coming. And until, in this case here, you set the stage. And I wanted to use that movie reference, and I've used it before, back in the day of building content repositories with metadata and all that, and then saying, hey, guys, it's available at this address. And did anybody, come to it, right? Build it and they will come. So there's been 1.2 trillion at last, figure that I've seen thrown out, put behind AI. So there's been a lot of money built. Now, are people just coming? Maybe this thing needs Kevin Costner as a rep. I don't know. But when you think about, this thing is built. Now the question is, how do you apply it? Scale, you just mentioned an example with a use case for training. Well, what if you point at, and I've actually done this with a client, point at a website have it learn the products. You could tell it what to go learn on the website, have it learn, in this case here, what they promote, and then turn around and have it build a 30-day onboarding for a specific task, for a specific role, for a specific point in time where you might have been there for 5 years. Now we're training them on something new. It'll actually do it. And the damnedest thing is, at the end of doing it with you, because you've now fed it the backgrounder, right? Because it's if there's nothing in, there'll be very little out. You've done it. So clearly that 1.2 trillion investment, it's out there, it's available, anybody can use it. But if you don't know how to use it, so maybe another role, Brian, could be, AI reg manager, right? They don't know, they don't have to know how to build a reg. You can go up on AWS. I did it the other day. I did a YouTube video and I built something on Bedrock. I don't even know what Bedrock was before I went into the YouTube video, but the damn worked. And now it's doing 30-day onboarding for anything. But I had to give it something. So do I know what a vector database is? Does anybody here know what a vector database is?
I do now.
I still don't. But what I do know is that it's this really smart little categories that puts all this information, but I didn't give it any taxonomy. It just did it for me, which was fascinating to me. Yeah, no, I think the Kevin Costner reference, I've yet to build anything and people just came.
So. Yeah, and so are we really talking about potentially two different things, right? So there's knowledge work that AI does for you, and then of course there's these automated processes that agents will do, leveraging AI to do those things on behalf of organizations. And then there's
the automation versus augmentation.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the challenge. Is I think it can automate jobs, but when they're automating really tedious work, I mean, I'll be honest with you, like coding is very, very tedious. And what AI is really good at is building a test case or building a little API, to do something. Those are structured, very precise, I consider it tedious things that it just really excels at. It loves it if it had a feeling, and it will just crank it all day long. It doesn't get tired. So that's those tasks, the automation of tasks frees up people then to solve more complex and more challenging problems, as opposed to just slogging through the tedious work.
Yeah, and all the, I did a little bit of research on pointing AI at it once again on, kind of the fast food industry, and how AI was going to help. And at the end of all those, it was, allowing people to engage, allowing people to be more customer service oriented, so doing all those, again, repetitive automated tasks that make them able then to focus on a customer-centric experience, those types of things.
Yeah, McDonald's is doing a really good job of leveraging AI in their restaurants. And it's very conversational as well. So, and I know that other countries have advanced in the AI space as well, where the experiences that they're creating with AI are valuable. In what people experience, whether it's in shopping or, even doing customer service. Can you imagine having customer service be enjoyable? Like that's a possibility. So those things are real. And I know, Orchestrator, you have found a challenge to solve with AI in your event too. The one coming up in Twin Cities, where you thought would be great to somehow harness the 180 people that are coming. There's probably something valuable in those conversations, and we're exploring the idea, and we're actually deploying a conversational AI to help do that. Do you want to tell people a little bit about that?
I think you're referring to Ellie.
Yeah, Ellie.
You got to name
stuff
about these
Ellie.
days. I'm not even sure where the Ellie name came from. That could have came from you, Brian.
Yeah,
so I like the name. So with the name Ellie, so what is it going to be for? It's basically a conversational AI example, right? Anybody calls this number, you give them a number, you call it, and it'll have a conversation starting with, how can I help? And it's a beautiful thing that they can then respond from there. It doesn't say dial 1 if you want to hear about the sessions, dial 2 if you want to hear about Brian Lambert's background. That doesn't do that. No, it actually just says, where do you want to start? Now, at some point, Ellie will actually start asking the person, the caller, questions. As soon as there's a gap, she'll say, is there a particular session you want to hear about? Or do you have any questions on how to find parking for the event? The kind of things that, Brian, I was hopeful to never have to answer. 180 people. I could literally have 20 calls just on the logistical aspects of getting there.
Yeah, like what's for lunch?
Ellie, well, there's nothing for lunch, by the way. So I got to tell them that so they don't come hungry. So 180 people, Brian, can only do so much. But when you think about, the Ellie example, she's learning before and during. We're going to be using Slido during the slides to interact with people, and she's going to pick up on that data coming in. We're going to ask everything from, do you have a plan? Does your executive team support it? So we're going to have, they call it the gold, right? Which are the conversations we're having on why aren't you doing this? We're going to have that conversation. Or if you are doing it, what are you doing with it? But we're going to capture that. So then Ellie's going to be around after. So let's say it's 2 weeks from now. I remember somebody doing a session on RAG. And for those that are scratching their head, retrieval augmented generation. It took me a long time to figure that out, by the way. I don't know why. But RAG. So now that I know what RAG is, I want to be able to use RAG and I be able to do it. And this person covered it. Why wouldn't Ellie be able to be there to say, that was covered and here's the deck? And oh, by the way, the transcript, which we're using Otter AI, I'm going to start throwing out some AI technologies. There's AI technologies for so many things right now. You may not stick with it, kind of like web conferencing, but you'll start using it. and so, yeah, I think if Ellie has an ultimate purpose, Brian, and I think what the vision around this is going to be, it's going to be supporting, is basically a digital admin for a community that's at 350, maybe 1,000 people this fall. We've got 17 different verticals signed up. Now, do I know all those verticals? Well, you guys know the answer to that. But, I'm hopeful that Ellie will, understand who's going to be there, the verticals, so that when somebody asks, hey, is there anybody else here from HVAC construction? I had to look up HVAC. That's actually something I'm getting into now. And so when you look into what Ellie's going to know in about 6 to 12 months, Brian, I hope she understands everything we covered at these one-off sessions, because we all know you leave these events, and how long does it take to forget 90% of it?
Yeah. Yeah. And then it'll be interesting too to think about leveraging that tool and its structured interviewing, because it's trying to get through the same questions with everybody if they call. Well, then you have a real gold mine on what folks are answering with regard to helping them get what they need, right? That's pretty amazing to think about, as opposed to, like you said, take this survey, answer the questions and tell us what you think. Not very valuable.
Yeah, let's check back on Ellie, because, I've heard feedback from, this is great, way better, to, I don't use my phone to make calls anymore, Craig. So you can give me numbers. I'm not dialing them. So I've heard a little bit of everything. It's a little bit disenchanting at times. You think to yourself, great resource, but no worries. We'll pivot. We'll make it, text worthy here soon. We'll be able to text it.
Yep. All right, so let's talk about ways in which we can find value and create value in the AI age through the use of these new skills, maybe even finding a new role and creating a new role. I like to talk about that in the context of taking data and turning data into something actionable and valuable, and pointing that at a problem or an opportunity. And we talk about that a lot in the AI lead book with the speed layer. The ability to take raw inputs such as documents, information from calls like we're doing with Ellie, do some AI magic on it, and then solve a problem, create value. And that there's ways in which you can elevate your own role by thinking this way, and also create new roles, or perhaps develop new skills. And that's critical. And what I'd love to do is explore, like, if you are in a role right now, what can you do, or perhaps what might be something that you could do as you're going, as opposed to stopping everything and going off into a 90-day, learning thing where you do nothing but learn AI. What are some things that you can do? Well, you could actually learn as you're going. You could actually get access to some tools and some technologies, and instead of doing perhaps a Google search, you could try asking Perplexity or asking ChatGPT or Claude first, as opposed to just Googling it. From a learning by doing perspective, you can do a lot by trying to, if you've been curious about how to use AI to prep for your quarterly review, perhaps ask the question to AI, how can you help me prep for my quarterly review? And then, there's a lot of work happening in piloting out AI applications and tools. In fact, there are people building them with the help of AI around specific use cases. So these are things that you can do in the flow of your regular role, your regular job, and they don't necessarily have to be in a side. The question is how do you get access to these? Where do you start? How do you figure out if they're worth it? Those are challenges that people have as they go forward. It's almost, I imagine, it's a bit overwhelming, right? Like if you just Google or ask ChatGPT, what tools are available, there's thousands now.
Think about it. Ask ChatGPT based upon your role, right? I mean, heck, if you're not a mechanic, how can I leverage AI in my role, right? And what would I need to learn? And it would spit out, right, a couple different tools or applications that you want to use. I mean, myself, being doing some instructional design, building courses. So when I was creating visuals, one of the first tools I was using was Napkin AI. Not too bad, right? I mean, it quickly builds, images. And, then I discovered Gamma that someone turned me on to, and, took that journey. And now I can create, beautiful images incredibly quickly. Build a PowerPoint for a meeting coming up that I have, maybe, right? So it's just being curious and asking them, where do I want to start? And then begin to play with them. Really simple.
Yeah. Well, has anybody else done any tinkering, if you will, in their AI garage that you want to share about?
Well, I could tell you a little bit about voice systems. I'm not a huge fan of voice systems. I know, for instance, OpenAI has improved theirs so much, but I find that they get impatient and they kind of jump in when I'm really just kind of gathering my thoughts. So what I've started doing is I've started using the transcription software on my phone. It's an accessibility option, right? And for the hard of hearing, or like me, the hard of listening. But I can have that, and I can kind of record stuff in text. So what I'll do is I'll clear the room, I'll start this thing up, and then I will start talking to one of the experts. And I might talk for 30 minutes, defining the problem, defining the purpose, setting the goals, going on recursive tangents about what we want to do along the way. The great thing is you could talk for an hour and throw that transcript, and it will do its best job of analyzing your intent and giving you the output you need. It's like they always used to say, any problem can be solved if you describe it fully enough. And that's what prompt engineering is about, is giving the AI the context that it needs in order to give you the right output. And so I call this method just invocations, right? Like it's a magical invocation. But you do this offline, then you go to the expert, and then you have it make sense out of the chaos.
So integrator, instead of typing all that in, you just have a conversation with it and have it synthesize it from there. Pretty much, right?
Yeah, have a monologue with it and say, here's what I want you to do.
Right.
And it will not get bored of listening to you explain in excruciating detail how you want it done.
It'll even throw in some,
Gotta be detail
It'll
oriented.
be like, it does the active listening. Oh, I understand. Oh, I understand. Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, one quick example, you could use that as a role play device. I got a big call tomorrow with a client. I'm going to do a role play. So I'm starting to think now more and more about AI as this digital coach, which, by the
Yeah.
way, is like Einstein. It knows a lot about a lot. And in fact, fun fact, they say that it's kind of exhausted. It's learning already. It's learned everything on the internet. It's hard for me to believe.
Yeah.
It. But let's say
Yeah.
it has. And then you synthesize that down to a specific coaching point. And I think, a role play before a call, maybe after the call. I think most people are using AI note takers. And if you're not, go for it. For $8 a month, you get your meeting minutes and your action items. And as one executive put it, so I've got 8 meetings a day. Can I search through all 8 meetings to find where my name was referenced? And then I could take action. So they were already thinking about, how do I synthesize my 8-hour, day into a, and then his question was, and then will it show me what led up to that question?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. There's one I use Fireflies, and you can go into Fireflies and actually set up a little tool in there. I can't remember what it's called, but at the end of each of my phone calls, I have it give me topic ideas. So I say at the end of every call, generate 3 topic ideas on what I could write about, or what I could do, or show ideas, and it does a good job. So yeah, it's amazing to think about. And then it's very tedious. Like it loves the tedious work. I mean, like you could you could say I don't know, test this data 10 different ways. And so if I have a data set, and I'm doing forecasting, and I want to do forecasting, and I want to pretend that only one data element of my data set will change. So let's say my revenue is higher. Give me all the scenarios related to my revenue being higher, and what I can do with that, or how I would communicate that against all these other variables, for example. So you could actually do high level analysis, but in the context of business language, as opposed to the context of a spreadsheet, in the context of a story, instead of of a spreadsheet.
Right.
My favorite one is I'll see if I can find it. You guys might get a kick out of this. I did it last night. I use a lemonade stand analogy. Pretend you have a lemonade stand, but instead of a lemonade stand, you're selling super smart chatbots. How would you go about selling super smart chatbots to others as a lemonade stand analogy? So if you prefer to learn through stories or movie anecdotes, or my son, he loves Japanese anime. So when I built the custom GPT for him, I have it teach as if he's in a Japanese or an anime movie, including reading the sound effects. Because he likes that. That's how he wants to learn. So why not? Right? It's kind of crazy to think about.
I have an example from school. I have kids who are middle school, and one of the teachers has started using ChatGPT to translate all of her newsletters and all of her messages back home to the parents into pirate speak. So all the emails we get from her are in pirate speak.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting to think about. And obviously AI can do some pretty amazing things with language translation on the fly, et cetera. So it's really fascinating to think about how much thinking power it can bring to bear, and how fast it can do these things.
Yeah.
Integrated.
There's so many examples on this particular point, Brian. You could take a a memo that's boring and say, in the tone of John Grisham, write this memo, and then turn around and say in a tone that a second grader. So I did both, by the way. In the second grader one, it was a cartoon. And it was led by Barney. I don't know where AI picked up Barney, but it was an actual cartoon led by Barney to describe, in this case here, the content that I sent it over its way. So whether it be in Barney speak or in John Grisham speak, or like you said, turn around and generate something in Serbian, it'll do all the above.
Yeah.
Think about all the opportunities for branding with that now, right? You can almost take any persona you want to be, with your product or what you're doing. Incredible.
Yeah, I didn't actually use Barney or John Grisham, by the way. I was careful, but the tone was there.
Yeah.
And the cartoon character was purple, so it kind of gave it away.
Yeah, it'll even generate a picture. Mm-hmm.
It will.
Yeah. So these are great examples, and I actually showed a family member about how it could do recipes. Last little story. I said, well, open up voice mode, hit the button, go to the fridge or the pantry, and say, here's the ingredients that I'd like to work with or cook with. I'd like to try to do something. I've got this here. I've got that there. I found this in the pantry. This is almost expired, so I want to eat it. Build me a menu using these items. And like it just spit it out. It was nuts. Like totally floored this person. Like, and then I said, well, it's only giving you 2 or 3 meals. Why don't you have it see how many meals it can make? And it spit out like 25 different meals with the same ingredients. It was nuts if you're into that type of cooking thing. So, instead of like, hey, what are we going to eat tonight? You can kind of gamify it and use your AI for that in voice mode, right? Or what are you going to drink? I've got all these on tap at the bar. Tell me about them if you're into that. So anyway,
you'll be the person at the bar talking to his phone.
That's right. All right. So last, as we wrap up here, I appreciate this conversation, and we're talking a little bit about it from a production perspective or adoption perspective. Leveraging AI has a lot of business impact in 3 key areas. One, when a new team comes together, how do you work? You can have AI help you with that. So onboarding and creating new teams. You can also scale content, create new content from existing content, translate the content, make the content into a different format for the end user or for the customer. And then from a market impact perspective, you can use it for a lot of analysis. You can have it help you figure out your strategy. You can figure out how to enter into new markets, et cetera. So as we wrap up today, I'd love to hear, and I know we've made it a little bit more organic, but what are some of the aha moments here that you all have with regard to AI and the use of AI as we explore new jobs and new roles, and more importantly, how to get curious about the use cases of AI? What are your thoughts?
Well, from a learning standpoint, as usual, I mean, again, it's really a simple process. We just talk about being curious, and that's always seems to pop out. But how many applications there are, so many things that we're just unaware of, just in our hour that we spent, the things that Orchestrator and Integrator bring up in terms of, and you, Brian, in terms of some of the applications and bots that you build to do things. It's just, you learn so much every day on what's available that you weren't even aware of. And it just, continues to happen.
Yeah.
Blows me away.
Well, my big takeaway has to do with, of course, from an integration perspective, is the back end, right? The underlying infrastructure. You can have a great idea, you can have an amazing AI tool, but if it isn't embedded into the workflow, right, you got to have the embedding be smooth. Otherwise, you can't get user adoption. So I think, user adoption is really closely tied to how your system is architected. Not necessarily how good the AI idea is, but how well does it show up in their workflow that already exists? Is it like a chatbot in Slack, something like
Yeah,
that?
I like that. And I'm going to pick up on that point, because putting this where people are already, right, overcome that. They're calling it now headless applications that just do things for you. And I was reminded, and part of the game here is unlearning stuff. I was reminded by a product leader for a product called Double O that does workflow management. That's my shout out. And so this technology, and I was saying to him, I said, look, so where do I prompt it? He goes, you got to get away from that. This is an autonomous workflow that you're building here today, Craig, and just have it do it at 8 o'clock each morning. Have a look at your calendar, have a look at who you're going to meet with today. It'll do the research and send you an email and update your CRM, but you're not logging into what it is we're about to build here. So it was a fantastic example. One takeaway that I have, Brian, coming out of this week, maybe not just today's call, for those that have picked up on the Shopify CEO's memo to his team, which apparently was leaked, whether it was leaked or not, who knows? But there are 5 points. One of the points which really caused controversy was, if you're going to hire somebody new, and this is the CEO now, if you're going to hire somebody new, prove that it can't be done with AI first before we hire the headcount. So, that's pretty heavy-handed with many people, and the responses were really quite mixed. But I think these controversial points we got to start talking about. So take a look at the memo. It's an interesting memo. Don't wait for the CEO to send the memo to you. Get out in front. Find out how you can use AI to, I don't know, be a hero within your department, within your organization. Because if the CEOs aren't sending this note now, they're thinking about it. And they'll probably use a different communication method. But Brian, that was my takeaway from the week. Your example of China was also pretty good, right? As of a certain grade, 7th grade, it's part of the curriculum. So it's coming. You're not going to sit this one out, but why wait?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, why wait for the shoe to drop, so to speak? Why not be proactive? And every major advancement in technology, people have had to make a choice on how they do it. And there's a whole bunch of theory around it. You've got the early adopters, you've got the more mature, if you will, wait for it to mature, and then you've got the laggards. I think it's okay to say, hey, I'm not an early adopter, but I think you got to have a plan about how you become an adopter, not just be a laggard in this space. I think laggards will end up in the space of things are dictated to them, and they don't necessarily control their destiny if they're not exploring. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here, so to speak, on if you're watching this show or listening. These are great discussions, and I appreciate everybody's time today to explore these topics. So I'll see you next week, next Friday. We'll have another conversation around the impact of AI and how it's impacting organizations in the AI age, and more importantly, your role in AI as well. So we'll see you next week on the AI Lead Show. Take care.
Have a great weekend.
See you guys.
Bye.